hope that you guys had a wonderful time on Sunday together and that you're all still surviving. So this week we're going to be looking at Acts chapter 4, the last bit from verse 32 to the end of the chapter, as well as chapter 5, verse 1 to 11. So just a few notes before we look at some of the verses. So up until now, the church faced threats against its very existence. The religious leaders, as you remember from last week, they had tried to stop the news about Jesus from spreading and the church from growing. That was in chapter 4, verse 17. But now there's something else that is threatening the early church. This was not a threat of survival, but it was one of corruption, and it threatened the unity and the health of the community. So there is a deliberate structure in the passage that we're going to look at this week. Chapter 4, verse 34 to 35 is the principle that lies behind the threat. In chapter 4, verse 36 to 37, it is the positive example that we have in Barnabas. And then in chapter 5, verse 1 to 11, it is the negative example that we have in Ananias and Sapphira. So let's look at the verses. In verse 32, these verses set the scene. The church is described as a community united in their beliefs, so their mind, and their commitments, their heart. They were committed to one another's welfare, and incredible generosity meant that they shared everything. Then verse 33, they were committed to the growth of the church as the apostles continued to preach the resurrection, despite warnings not to do so in chapter 4, verse 19. Then in verse 34 to 35, the sacrificial giving was not a condition of membership. It was a voluntary act, and it was as the need arose. So when someone saw a need, they gave money to the church leaders, and they then distributed the gift as needed. And in verse 36 to 37, we see Barnabas, Joseph. He is one example of sincere self-sacrifice for the common good. And by contrast, the section that follows reveals Ananias and Sapphira to be deceiving hypocrites. So let's have a look at Ananias and Sapphira. In verse 1 to 4, it is clear from Peter's response to Ananias that the sin was not in holding back some of the money for their own purposes. So the issue wasn't that Ananias and Sapphira held back their money, but it was in attempting to deceive the apostles into thinking that they had given the entire sum of money. So this becomes clear when Peter confronts Sapphira with a direct question in verse 8, and he says, "Is this the price you and Ananias got for the land?" And she lies and she says, "Yes." Now the narrator has already noted that Ananias and Sapphira had conspired, presumably to deceive the apostles in this way, which we see in chapter 5, verse 2. And in verse 5, we see that Ananias pays the ultimate penalty and the community is shocked. Then if you look at verse 8 to 10, Peter provides an opportunity for Sapphira to do the right thing. But since she is unaware that her husband is dead, she sticks to the original deceitful plan, and she too pays the price for her deceit. And then verse 11, the punishment seems very severe to us, as it did to those who witnessed it. But it serves as a very clear warning to the community that hypocrisy, pretending to be what we are not, has no place in the church of Jesus, in the church that Jesus loves. You see, deceit will always bring division. And so the warning against hypocrisy is as real for us today as it was for those in the early church. We too should be gripped by fear when we see God's judgment of such great wickedness. But we must understand that this judgment is out of love for the purity and unity of the church. The focus of this lesson is not about giving money away or about being struck dead for telling a lie. What lies at the heart of this lesson, it is about how good church is as a community when Jesus' followers live unselfishly and with integrity. So it's worth remembering that the book of Acts recounts the acts of the apostles and not the the acts of the church. See, what is recorded here is descriptive rather than prescriptive. So in other words, this is not what we should do or what will happen, but it's rather what did happen. So people being struck dead for lying is not something that we see in the church today. But the story is recorded to help us to understand how precious the church is to Jesus and how seriously he takes any attempts to undermine the unity of the church. I really hope that you as parents will really enjoy preparing this study for your children. It's a fantastic reminder for us about the preciousness of the church to Jesus, especially right now as we are not able to gather in person to meet together. But this is also a fantastic opportunity for us to pass on to our children the great value that the church has in the eyes of Jesus. So have a wonderful time together as you study these verses, and I pray that it will be a great blessing to you and to your families.